Yeah, so this is a guest by Camus. He's a French author, lived through World War II. He was very politically active at the time. That's all I know about him. So the schoolmaster was watching two men climb towards him. So we have a total of three people. One was on horseback and the other was on foot. They had not yet tackled the abrupt rise leading to the schoolhouse built on the hillside. They were toiling onwards, making slow progress in the snow among the stones and the vast expanse of the high deserted plateau. So they're going through snow and they're going through a plateau. It's probably somewhere up on like a hill or a mountain. Just in terms of the setting, which is helpful. From time to time, the horse stumbled without hearing anything yet. You could see the breath issuing from the horse's nostrils. One of the men, at least, knew the region. They were following the trail, although it had disappeared days ago under a layer of dirty white snow. So it looks like there was a storm a couple days ago. One guy knows where he's going. Everyone's here has walked through like a winter storm, right? You're blind. The schoolmaster calculated it would take them a half hour to get onto the hill. It was cold. He went back to the school to try and get a sweater. So, you know, the schoolmaster is, well, he lives in a school. Okay. So we've learned a lot already here, you know. So again, I'm pretending we're going this blind. The setting, it's in a school at winter. And you notice how I'm putting it in like short form, right? You don't need to write full-on sentences everywhere. So it looks, the setting so far looks like it's in a school, it's in the winter. We don't know the time, we don't know the exact region. Oh, sorry, it's on a hillside, because that's what it said. This might be important, this might not be important. We'll know later. So he crossed the empty frigid classroom. On the blackboard, the four rivers of France, drawn with four different colored chalks, have been flowing towards their estuaries for the past 3 days. So probably in France. So have been flowing towards their estuaries for the past 3 days. Snow had suddenly fallen mid-October after 8 months of drought without the transition of rain. And the 20 pupils, more or less, who lived in the villages scattered over the plateau had stopped coming. So now we know a little bit more, right? We know that it's in October. That's very rare for them to get snow, clearly. And they just had 8 months of drought. And this schoolmaster now has no students. So we know a lot now. We know it's in France. We know it's mid-October. We know they had a drought. Oop, not a drought, a drought. Whether this means something, we don't know yet. We know that this is about the who and what are we section. So it's probably going to relate to the people, not to the place. So the students had stopped coming. With fair weather, they would return. Daru now heated the only single room with his lodging, adjourned in the classroom, and given also onto the plateau to the east. So Daru is our schoolmaster. So like the class windows, his window looked to the south too. On that side, the school was a few kilometers from the point where the plateau began to slope towards the south. In clear weather, could be seen the purple mass of the mountain range where the gap opened onto the desert. So they're also in the desert. So again, we've learned a lot here. We know his name, we know they're in the desert, we know they're in France on top of a hill, yada yada. So somewhat warned, Daru returned to the window from which he had first seen the two men. They were no longer visible, hence they must have tackled the rise. The sky was not so dark, for the snow had stopped falling during the night. The morning had opened with a dirty light which had scarcely become brighter as the ceilings of clouds lifted. As 2 in the afternoon, it seemed as if day were merely beginning. But still, this was better than those 3 days when the thick snow was falling amidst unbroken darkness with little gusts of wind that rattled the double door of the classroom. Then Darrow had spent long hours in this room, leaving it only to go to the shed and to feed the chickens or get some coal. Fortunately, the delivery truck from Tajik the nearest village to the north, had brought his supplies 2 days before the blizzard. They would return in 48 hours. I assume that means the delivery truck. The delivery truck's coming back in 2 days. Besides, he had enough to resist the siege, but the little room was cluttered with bags of wheat that the administration left as a stock to distribute to those of his pupils whose family had suffered from the drought. Actually, they had all been victims because they were very poor. So all of his students are in poverty. Every day, Darrow would distribute a ration to the children. They had missed it, he knew, during these bad days because they hadn't attended. Possibly one of the fathers or big brothers would come this afternoon and he could supply them with grain. It was just a matter of carrying them over to the next harvest. Now shiploads of wheat were arriving from France and the worst was over. But it would be hard to forget that poverty, that army of ragged ghosts wandering in the sunlight. The plateaus burned to a cinder month after month. The earth shriveled up little by little, literally scorched, every stone bursting into dust under one's foot. The sheep had died by the thousands, and even a few men here and there, sometimes without anyone's knowing. So all of this was describing the intense drought, right? So this is all talking about, well, I won't even really break that down, but we're seeing descriptions of the drought. And we're starting to see something here called like imagery, right? Hard to forget that army of ragged ghosts wandering in the sunlight. Hard to forget those people. So these are all literary devices that we'll learn about later. The next paragraph. In contrast with such poverty, he who lived almost like a monk in his remote schoolhouse, nonetheless satisfied with the little he had and with the rough life, had felt like a lord in his whitewashed walls, his narrow couch, his unpainted shelves, his well, and his weekly provision of food and water. So this tells us a lot about our character, right? This is Darrow, right? So he's thankful for what he has. He himself says that he doesn't have much. It is a rough life, but he feels like a lord because he has shelter and he has food, which are things that not everyone currently has right now. So this is Darrow. I'm putting his name here because, hey, this tells us something about him. Again, I'm not writing a lot. I'm just giving myself some key context to look back on later. Because when you write these notes, it is to help you 2 months from now. You will forget this story. You'll forget a lot of the things about it. It's to give you the context you need when you come back to it without having to reread the whole thing. So he felt like the Lord with his weekly provision of food and water, and suddenly the snow, without warning, without the foretaste of rain. This is the way the region was, cool to live in, even without men, who didn't help matters either. But Darren had been born here. Everywhere else, he felt exiled. So he's not happy in this. He stepped out onto the terrace in front of the schoolhouse. The two men were now halfway up the slope. He recognized the horseman as Balducci, the old gendarme he had known for a long time. So we now have our second character. These are the two men. They made their way up. One of them, the guy on the horse, is Balducci, which is his friend, right? So again, I'm just writing down the name. Lets me know down here, but we know that they've known him for a long time. So Balducci was holding on to the end of a rope an Arab who was walking behind him with his hands bound and head lowered. So this is our third person that we know about so far. So with his hands bound and his head lowered, one's on a horse, and this guy who's bound is on his feet walking. What can we probably presume he is? Prisoner. It's probably a prisoner. Right, we're using the context here. We don't know this for sure yet, but if this is the case, it's probably get confirmed. So the gendarme waved the green to which Darrow did not reply, lost as he was in the contemplation of the Arab dressed in a faded blue jalaba, his feet in sandals but covered with socks of heavy raw wool. His head surmounted by a narrow, short sheet. They were approaching. Balducci was holding back his horse in order to not hurt the Arab, and the group was advancing slowly. Within earshot, Balducci shouted, 1 hour to do the 3 kilometers from El Amir. Daru did not answer. Short and square in a thick sweater, he watched him climb. Not once had the Arab raised his head. Hello, said Daru when they got into the bears. Come in and warm up. Balducci painfully got down from his horse without letting go of the rope. From under his bristling mustache, he smiled at the schoolmaster. His dark little eyes, deep set under a tanned forehead, and his mouth surrounded with wrinkles made him look attentive and studious. So we now know like what Balducci looks like, right? He has a mustache, he has short eyes, he has a really, really dark forehead, and he has wrinkles, makes him look a little bit older. So probably middle-aged or something. So Daru took the bridle, led the horse to the shed, and came back to these 2 men, who were now waiting for him in the school. He led them into his room. I am going to heat up the classroom, he said. We'll be more comfortable there. When he entered the room again, Balducci was on the couch. He had undone the rope tying into the Arab, who had squatted near the stove. His hands were still bound, the sheet pushed back on his head, and he was looking toward the window. At first, Daru noticed only his huge lips, fat, smooth, almost negroid, yet his nose was straight. His eyes were dark and full of fever. Keep in mind, this is written in like the 40s, so that's why you see some language.
What was he just describing?
He's describing who we think is the prisoner now. Yeah, in fact, I'm actually going to write that in. So we got Balducci, and then prisoner. You know what they maybe look like. This probably won't be relevant to the story, but it's nice to have a vision of what they look like in our head. So his nose was straight, his eyes were dark and full of fever. The Shipsha had revealed an obstinate forehead, and under the weathered skin, now rather discolored by the cold, the whole face had a restless and rebellious look that struck Daru in the Arab. Turning his face towards him, looked him straight into the eyes. Go into the other room, said the schoolmaster, and I'll make you some mint tea. Thanks, Balducci said. What a chore, how I long for retirement. And addressing his prisoner in Arabic, come on, you. So, yeah, prisoner. The Arab got up and slowly holding his bound wrist in front of him, went into the classroom. So Daru seems pretty welcoming to his guests. Right, he let them in, he gave them some tea. He seems to know the one, so Daru is welcoming. With the tea, Daru brought a chair, but Balducci was already enthroned on the nearest pupil's desk, and the Arab had squatted against the teacher's platform facing the stove, which stood between the desk and the window. When he held out the glass of tea to the prisoner, Daru hesitated at the sight of his bound hands. He might perhaps be untied. Sure, said Balducci, that was for the trick. He started to get to his feet, but Daru, setting the glass on the floor, had knelt beside the Arab. Without saying anything, the Arab watched him with his feverish eyes. Once his hands were freed, he rubbed his swollen wrists against each other, took a glass of tea, and sucked up the burning liquids in swift little sips. Good, said Daru. Where are you headed? Balducci withdrew his mustache from the tea. Here, son. Odd pupils, and you're spending the night. No, I'm going back to El Amur, and you will deliver this fellow to Tinglet. He is expected at the police headquarters. So the reason they made this trip up here is because, again, he said, you know, we were coming here. So what's happened is Balducci has given Daru a mission to deliver this fellow to Tinglet, which, if you remember from up above, is the nearest city. So Daru gets tasked. Daru gets tasked with a job. You will deliver this fellow to Tigris. He is expected at the police headquarters. Balducci was looking at Daru with a friendly little smile. What's this story? Asked the schoolmaster. Are you pulling my leg? No, son, those are the orders. The orders. I'm not. Daru hesitated, not wanting to hurt the old course guy. I mean, that's not my job. What's the meaning of that? In wartime, people do all kinds of jobs. Then I'll wait for the declaration of war. Balducci nodded. Okay, but the order exists and they concern you too. Things are brewing, it appears. There is talk of a forthcoming revolt. We are mobilized in the war. So we're getting a sense that there's some kind of unrest here, right? Which makes sense. There's a really nasty drought. People are starving. What do people do when they starve? They get unhappy, right? So there might be a revolt coming, a revolution coming. Daru still had this obstinate look. Listen, son, Balducci said. I like you and you must understand. There's only a dozen of us at ELA to patrol throughout the whole territory of a small department, and I must get back in a hurry. I was told to hand over this guy to you and return without delay. He couldn't be kept there. The village was beginning to stir. They wanted to take him back. You must take him to Tingwood tomorrow before the day is over. 20 kilometers shouldn't faze a husky fellow like you. So he's got to walk 20 kilometers. After that, all will be over. You'll come back to your pupils and your comfortable life. Behind the wall, the horse could be heard snorting and falling through the air. Daru was looking out the window. Decidedly, the weather was clear and the light was increasing over the snowy plateau. When all the snow was melted, the sun would take over again and once more would burn the fields of snow. For days still, the unchanging sky would shed its dry light on the solitary expanse where nothing had any connection with the man. After all, he said, turning around towards Balducci, what did he do? And before the gendarme had opened his mouth, he asked, does he speak French? No, not a word. We had been looking for him for a month, but they were hiding him. He killed his cousin. Okay. A couple things. We have a language barrier, right? They don't speak the same language. How well, have you been able to communicate with people when you don't speak with them? Has anyone ever encountered that? Like you don't speak any words at all with someone? You could probably still communicate fairly okay. Kind of.
I was actually playing Xbox Live with a guy from Belgium like a week ago.
Oh yeah.
And like every now and then he'd be like, I don't know how to say that in English. Okay?
Oh yeah. Even if you played a video game with no mic, you could like ping something on the map, right? You can communicate okay with people.
He'd be talking to his girlfriend and I think he said Dutch.
Oh yeah. Yeah, so this might come into play, the language, it probably will. And we also know that he killed his cousin, so he's a murderer, right? Which is obviously why he was taken as a prisoner and he needs to be delivered to the authorities. Pretty simple. Is he against us? I don't think so, but you can never be sure. Why did he kill? A family squabble, I think. One owed the other grain, it seems. It's not all clear. In short, he killed his cousin with a billhook, like a sheep. Chris, I don't know what a billhook is, but something. Balducci made the gesture of drawing a blade across his throat, and the Arab, his attention attracted, watched him with a sort of anxiety. Daru felt a sudden wrath against the man, against all men with their rotten spite, their tireless hates, their bloodlust. So Daru seemed to be a pretty chill guy so far, right? All of a sudden, Daru hates the prisoner. Right? And why does he hate him? Because he killed someone. Daru hates the prisoner because of the murder. But the kettle was singing on the stove. He served Balducci more tea, hesitated, and then served the Arab again, who a second time drank avidly. So he was pretty nice in his prison before, right? He was the one who asked to like untie his wrist. He was the one who went and got him tea, gave him a warm place to sit by. Why is he hesitating? He's hesitating to serve this guy.
Although the prisoner,
Yeah,
oh, the murder, he found out another piece of information.
yeah, instantly, right? His opinion of him dropped a lot. Yeah. He still served him. That tells us a little bit about Daru, but he hesitated. Who drank a second time avidly. His raised arms made the jalaba fall open, and the schoolmaster saw his thin, muscular chest. Thanks, kid, Balducci said, and now I'm off. He got up and went towards the Arab, taking a small rope from his pocket. What are you doing? The Arab asked dryly. Balducci, disconcerted, showed him the rope. Don't bother. The old gendarme hesitated. It's up to you. Of course, you are armed. I have my shotgun. Where? In my trunk. You ought to have it near your bed. Why? I have nothing to fear. You're crazy, son. If there's a revolt, no one is safe, and we're all in the same boat. So we know that our schoolmaster has a weapon, and that he's, so he asked him, what are you doing, with this rope? Is he seemed to hesitate? Don't bind him again. You're crazy, son. There's an uprising, no one is safe, we're all in the same boat. I'll defend myself, I'll have time to see them coming. Balducci began to laugh, and then suddenly the mustache covered the white teeth. You'll have time? Okay, that's just what I was saying. You have always been a little cracked. That's why I like you. My son was like that. At this time, he took out a revolver and put it on the desk. Keep it. I don't need two weapons from here to El Amur. The revolver shone against the black paint of the table. When the gendarme turned towards him, the schoolmaster caught the smell of leather and horse flesh. Listen, Balducci, Barry said suddenly, every bit of this disgusts me. And first of all, your fellow here, but I won't hand him over. Fight, yes, if I have to, but not that. So, one sentence, we learn a lot about. So he doesn't want to turn this guy over. This guy he doesn't like. He will not turn him over to the police. He's willing to fight in whatever war is going to come with. He doesn't want the weapons. He doesn't want this guy's back. What do we think about Darius so far?
He's like very by himself, he likes to be by himself, I guess.
He which?
I think it seems like he likes to be by himself, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, so we're starting to formulate our opinions of him. Again, this section is really about the people within it. We don't know a whole lot just yet, but he won't hand over the prison. Again, I'm not writing a lot, I'm writing down a note for you to come back to. The old gendarme stood in front of him and looked at him severely. You're being a fool, he said slowly. I don't like it either. You don't get used to putting a rope on a man even after years of it. And you're ashamed, yes, ashamed, but you can't let them have their way. I won't hand them over, Harry said again. It's an order, son, and I repeat it. That's right, repeat to them what I told you. I won't hand them over. Balducci made a visible effort to reflect. He looked at the Arab and at Daru, and at last he decided, no, I won't tell them anything. If you want to drop us, go ahead. I'll not denounce you. I have an order to deliver the prisoner, and I'm doing so. And now you'll sign this paper for me. So Balducci is saying, no, I won't tell them anything, probably out of respect. They seem to know each other fairly well. There's no need, I'll not to die that you left him here with me. Don't be mean with me. I know you'll tell the truth. You're from hereabouts and you are a man, but you must sign. That's the rule. So he trusts him, at least, I know you'll tell the truth. You must sign, that's the rule. Darren opened his drawer, took out his own little square bottle of purple ink, a red wooden pen holder with the sergeant major pen used for making models of penmanship, and signed. The gendarme carefully folded the paper and put it in his wallet and moved towards the door. I'll see you off there, he said. No, said Balducci, there's no use being polite, you insulted me. So we can see now that the friendship is sour, right? Because he's not willing to follow the order. And he took that as an insult. He looked at the Arab. Looked at the air, motionless in the same spot, sniffed peevishly, and turned away towards the door. Goodbye, son, he said. The door shut behind him. Balducci appeared suddenly outside the window and then disappeared. His footsteps were muffled by the snow. The horse stirred on the other side of the wall, and several chickens fluttered into fright. A moment later, Balducci reappeared outside the window, leading the horse by the bridle. He walked towards the little rise without turning and disappeared from sight with the horse following him. A big stone could be heard bouncing down. They walked back towards the prisoner, who, without stirring, never took his eyes off him. Wait, the schoolmaster said in Arabic, so maybe not a language barrier, and went towards the bedroom. As he was going through the door, he had a second thought, went to the desk, took the revolver, and stuck it in his pocket. Again, he hesitated, right? He had a second thought, and he grabbed that gun. That gun he said he wouldn't need. Why did he grab it?
I doesn't trust them.
Yeah, doesn't trust him. The guy's hands are unbound. Like, hey, I'm just gonna leave. Hey, this guy's a murderer. I'm gonna leave this gun here on this table. I'm supposed to take him away to the cops. You're not gonna be shocked if that dude takes the gun when you turn your back, right? For some time, he lay on his couch watching the sky gradually close over, listening to the silence. It was this silence that seemed painful to him during the first days here, after the war. So he seemed to be a soldier, right? We saw that with his fountain pen. He had a gun, like his fountain pen said like sergeant, lieutenant sergeant or something like that. Says here after the war. He seems to be friends with this guy, other guy who seemed to be in the war. So we can probably assume in this case that Dare was in a war. Question mark. We don't know for sure, but it's a good assumption. Sometimes we have to make assumptions based on the context we have. He had requested a post in a little town at the base of the foothills separating the upper plateaus from the desert. Okay, yeah, so he probably was, right? He requested a post. There, rocky walls, green and black to the north, pink and lavender to the south, mark the frontier of the eternal summer. So, yeah, this guy's a former soldier. He's defiant north. He had been named to a post further north on the plateau itself. In the beginning, the solitude and silence had been carved for him on these wastelands, peopled only by stones. Occasionally, furrows suggested cultivation, but they had been dug to uncover a certain kind of good stone for building. The only plowing here was to harvest rocks. Elsewhere, a thin layer of soil accumulated in the hollows would be scraped out to enrich paltry village gardens. This is the way it was. Bare rock covered 3/4 of the region. Towns sprang up, flourished, then disappeared. Men came by, loved one another, or fought bitterly, then died. No one in this desert, neither he nor his guests, mattered. Yet outside the desert, this desert neither of them Dare knew could have really lived. So this is an interesting one. So first off, what we're really getting here is we're getting this description of the desert, right? It's really harsh. It's inhospitable to life. It's stone. People die here all the time. But then we see this quote here. Yet outside this desert, neither of them Dare knew could have really lived. What does that mean? And that's a hard question.
Who is he talking about?
So who is he talking about? It seems to be about the prisoner and Dare. So outside of the desert, neither of them could live. Yeah, that could be it. Like, it doesn't seem to be like, yeah, they'll starve to death. That doesn't seem to be like what we get from inside the desert, maybe, but from outside the desert, no, that doesn't seem to be it. Instead, it's talking about their status, right? Neither of them would have a life outside. The prisoner, because, hey, you just killed a guy. You got to go to jail. Daru, because he was unhappy before, right? We saw this information presented in here earlier. So neither of them can have a happy, fulfilling life. Okay. So when he got up, no noise came from the classroom. He was amazed at the unmixed joy he derived from the mere thought that the Arab might have fled and that he would be alone with no decision to make. So he, he's excited, like, hey, this guy just ran away. Wouldn't that be nice? He doesn't want to make the decision. And that decision is whether to let him go or whether to bring him to the town. But the prisoner was there. He had merely stretched out between the stove and the desk. With eyes open, he was staring at the ceiling. In that position, his thick lips were particularly noticeable, giving him a pouting look. Come, said Derek. The Arab got up and followed him. In the bedroom, the schoolmaster pointed to a chair near the table under the window. The Arab sat down without taking his eyes off Derek. Are you hungry? Yes, said the prisoner. So there is no language barrier. That was a good guess from before. But now we know that they can at least communicate basically. There is at the table for two. That flour and oil shaped the cake in the frying pan and lighted the little stove that functioned on bottled gas. While the cake was cooling, he went up to the shed to get cheese, eggs, dates, and condensed milk. When the cake was done, he set it on the window still to cool. Heated some condensed milk diluted with water and beat up the egg into an omelet. In one of his motions, he knocked against the revolver stuck in his right pocket. Set the bowl down, went to the classroom, and put the revolver in the desk drawer. Doesn't want the gun. When he came back into the room, night was falling. He put on the light and served the Arab. Eat, he said. The Arab took a piece of cake, lifted it eagerly to his mouth, and stopped short. And you, he asked, after you, I'll eat too. The thick lips opened slightly, the Arab hesitated, and then bit into the cake determinedly. He's basically trying to see, like, is this guy about to poison me? What does he decide? Oh, I'm hungry enough anyways, right? So he's worried about being, poisoned or drugged or something. The meal over, the Arab looked at the schoolmaster. Are you the judge? No, I'm simply keeping you until tomorrow. Why do you eat with me? So he's curious, like, how come you're eating them? Because I'm hungry. And it's not a simple ask like question as how come you're doing that? It's like, oh, because I'm hungry, but it has to do with like the motivations behind them, right? Probably because the prisoner expects him to be disgusting, right? You wouldn't sit down to a nice meal with someone you really, really, really hate, most likely, or you wouldn't want to do it. You'd hesitate to do it, right? Same thing here. The Arab fell silent. The Arab got up and went out. He brought back a folding bed from the shed, set it up between the table and the stove, perpendicular to his own bed. From a large suitcase which, upright in the corner, served as a shelf with papers, he took 2 blankets and arranged them on the camp bed. Then he stopped, felt useless, and sat down on his bed. There was nothing more to do or to get ready. He had to look at this man. Again, he does not want to do this decision. He does not want to bring this guy to there, and he doesn't like this guy at all. He had to look at this man. He looked at him, therefore, trying to imagine his face bursting with rage. He couldn't do so. He could see nothing but the dark yet shining eyes and the animal mouth. Why did you kill him? He asked in a voice whose hostile tone surprised him, right? Hostile tone, angry. So he's still angry at the prisoner. Maybe disgusted is a better word, but he's still upset. The Arab looked away. He ran away, I ran after him. He raised his eyes to there again, and they were full of a sort of woeful interrogation. Now what will they do to me? Are you afraid? He stiffened, turned his eyes away. Are you sorry? The Arab stared at him open mouthed. Obviously, he did not understand. Daru's annoyance was growing, but at the same time, he felt awkward and self-conscious with his body wedged between the 2 beds. Lie down there, he said impatiently. That's your bed. The Arab didn't move. He called to Daru. Tell me. The schoolmaster looked at him. Is the gendarme coming back tomorrow? I don't know. Are you coming with us? I don't know. Why? The prisoner got up and stretched out on top of the blankets, his feet towards the windows. The light from the electric bulb shone straight into his eyes, and he closed them at once. So they have electricity. Why? Dare repeated, standing beside the bed. Dare opened his eyes under the blinding light and looked at him, trying not to blink. Come with us, he said. In the middle of the night, Dare was still not asleep. He had gone to the bed after undressing completely. He generally slept naked. But when he suddenly realized that he had nothing on, he hesitated. He felt vulnerable, and the temptation came to him to put his clothes back on. Then he shrugged his shoulders, after all. He wasn't a child. And if need be, he could break his adversary in two. So we know that, this prisoner is really small, and it seems to be that Dare is a very large man, right? So he's confident he could take him in a fight. From his bed, he could observe him, lying on his back, still motionless, with his eyes closed under the harsh light. When Dare turned out the light, the darkness seemed to coagulate all of a sudden. Little by little, the night came back to life in the window, where the starless sky was stirring gently. The schoolmaster soon made out the body lying at his feet. The Arab still did not move, but his eyes seemed open. A faint wind was prowling around the schoolhouse. Perhaps it would drive away the clouds, and the sun would reappear. During the nights, the wind increased. The hens fluttered a little and then were silent. The Arab turned over on his side with his back to Dare, whom thought he heard him moan. Then he listened for the guests breathe in, becoming heavier and more regular. He listened to that breath so close to him and mused without being able to go to sleep. In this room where he had been sleeping alone in a year, his presence bothered him. But it bothered him also by imposing on him the sort of brotherhood he knew well, but refused to accept in present circumstances. So, some sort of brotherhood, he seems to feel connected to this guy somehow. Also, he's waiting for him to fall asleep, right? He's listening to his breathing, waiting for it to seem like he's asleep. That makes sense. Men who share the same rooms, soldiers or prisoners, develop a strange alliance, as if, having cast off their armor with their clothing, they've fraternized every evening, over and above their differences in the ancient community of dream and fatigue. But Dare shook himself. He didn't like such musings, and it was essential to sleep. A little later, however, when the Arab stirred slightly, the schoolmaster was still not asleep. When the prisoner made a second move, he stiffened on the alert. The Arab was lifting himself slowly on his arm, with almost the motion of a sleepwalker. Seated upright in bed, he waited motionless without turning his head towards Dare, as if he were listening attentively. Dare did not stir. It had just occurred to him that the revolver was still in the drawer of his desk. It was better to act once, yet he continued to observe the prisoner who, with the same slithery motion, put his feet on the ground, waited again, and then began to stand up slowly. So, the prisoner seems to wake up, and obviously he's running, right? Dare was about to call out to him when the Arab began to walk in a quiet, unnatural, but extraordinary silent way. He was headed towards the door at the end of the room that opened into the shed. He lifted the latch with precaution and went out, pushing the door behind him without shutting it. Dare had not stirred. He's running away, he thought. Good riddance. Now he doesn't have to decide, right? What a relief. Yet he listened attentively. The hens were not fluttering. The guest must be on close out. A faint sound of water reached him, and he didn't know what it was until the Arab stood again, framed in the doorway, closed the door carefully, and came back to bed without a sound. Then Dare returned his back on him and fell asleep. Still later, he seemed from the depths of his sleep to hear furtive steps around the foothouse. I'm dreaming, I dream. I'm dreaming, I dream. He repeated it to himself, and he went on sleeping. So, he thought the prisoner was running away. That's a pretty logical conclusion to come to. The prisoner came back, literally woke up, went to the bathroom, came back. Could have ran away. Dare wasn't going to stop him. When he awoke, the sky was clear and the loose window let in a cold, pure air. The Arab was asleep and hunched up under the blankets now, his mouth open, utterly relaxed. But when Darius shook him, he started dreadfully, staring at Darius with wild eyes as if he had never seen him in such a frightened expression that the schoolmaster stepped back. Don't be afraid, it's me, you must be. The Arab nodded his head and said yes. Calm had returned to his face, but his expression was still vacant and listless. The coffee was ready. They drank it together, seated together on the folding bed as they munched the pieces of the cake. Then Daru led the Arab under the shed and showed him the faucet where he washed. He went back into the room, folded the blankets in the bed, made his own bed, and put the room in order. Then he went through the classroom and out onto the terrace. The sun was already rising in the blue sky. A soft, bright light was bathing the desert at the toe. On the ridge, the snow was melting in spots. The stones were about to reappear. Crouched on the edge of the plateau, the schoolmaster looked at the deserted expanse. He thought of Balducci. He had hurt him, for he had sent him off in a way he didn't want to be associated with him. He could still hear their guard arms for a while. Without knowing why, he felt strange, empty, and vulnerable. At that moment, from the other side of the schoolhouse, the prisoner called. Daru listened to him despite himself, and then furious, threw a pebble that whistled through the air, sinking into the snow. The man's stupid crime revolted him, but to hand him over was contrary to. Right, so we see this is the dilemma, right? Every story we read is going to have some type of tension in it. You know, that's build mistakes. Here's our tension. You know, hey, I don't like this guy. He's a murderer, but I don't want to hand him over. We don't fully know why he doesn't want to hand him over. Merely thinking about it made him smart with humiliation, and he cursed at one and the same time his own people who had sent him this Arab, and the Arab too, who dared to kill and not manage to get away. They got up, walked in a circle on the terrace, waited motionlessly, and then went back into the schoolhouse. The Arab, leaning over the cement floor of the shed, was washing his teeth with 2 fingers. Daru looked at him and said, "Come." He went back into the room ahead of the prisoner. He slipped a hunting jacket on his sweater and put on his walking shoes. Standing, he waited until the Arab had put on his sheesh and sandals. They went into the classroom, and the schoolmaster pointed to the exit, saying, "Go ahead." The fellow didn't budge. "I'm coming," said Daru. The Arab went out. Daru went back into the room and made a package of pieces of rusk, dates, and sugar. In the classroom, before going out, he hesitated a second of his desk and then crossed the threshold and locked the door. "That's the way," he said. He started towards the east, followed by the prisoner. But a short distance from the schoolhouse, he thought he heard a slight sound behind him. He retraced his steps and examined the surroundings of his house. There was no one there. The Arab watched him without seeming to understand. "Come on," David said. They walked for an hour and rested beside a sharp peak of limestone. The snow was melting faster and faster, and the sun was breaking up the puddles at once, rapidly cleaning the plateau, which gradually dried and vibrated with the air itself. When they resumed walking, the ground rained under their feet. From time to time, a bird rent the space in front of them with a joyful cry. Daru breathed in deeply the fresh morning light. He felt a sort of rapture before the vast, familiar expanse, now almost entirely yellow under its dome of blue sky. They walked an hour more, descending towards the south. They reached a level height made up of crumbly rocks. From there on, the plateau sloped down eastwards towards a low plain where there were a few spindly trees, and to the south towards outcroppings of rock that gave the landscape a chaotic look. Daru surveyed the 2 directions. There was nothing but the sky on the horizon. Not a man could be seen. He turned towards the Arab, who was looking at him blankly. Daru held up the package to him. "Take it," he said. "There are dates, sugar, and bread. You can hold out for 2 days. Here are 1,000 francs too." So what does he do? He gives him, I'll say food. Food and money, right? Gives him rations, right? He also what's he doing with this? "Here, take this and go." He's free now. You're free to go. The Arab took the package of the money, but kept his hands full of chest levels, as if he didn't know what to do with what was given to him. Now look, the schoolmaster said, as he pointed in the direction of the east. That's the way to Tingwood. You have a 2-hour walk. At Tingwood, you'll find the administration and the police. They are expecting you. The Arab looked towards the east, still holding the package and the money against his chest. The Arab took his elbows and turned him rather roughly towards the south. At the foot of the hike on which they stood could be seen a paved path. That's the trail across the plateau. In a day's walk here, you'll find the pasture lands and the first nomads. They'll take you in and shelter you according to their law. So what does he do? He points in two directions, right? That there's a reason why I did this. They surveyed the two directions. One is, hey, hand yourself over to the cops. The other one is, you can get away lickety split. What are most people probably going to do in this situation? They're going to go to the nomads and not turn themselves in. So these two directions on the previous page represent two choices, right? Again, tension. Okay, so I'm just going to go back to this last page here. We'll finish up the story. In a day's walk from here, you'll find the pasture lands and the first nomads. They'll take you in and shelter you according to their law. The Arab had now turned towards Dario, and a sort of panic was visible in his expression. Listen, he said. Listen, he said. Dario shook his head. No, be quiet. Now I'm leaving you. He turned his back on him, took 2 long steps in the direction of the school, looked hesitantly at the motionless Arab, and then started off again. For a few minutes, he heard nothing but his own step, as on the cold ground, and did not turn his head. A moment later, however, he turned around. The Arab was still there on the edge of the hill, his arms hanging now. He was looking at the schoolmaster. Dario felt something rise in his throat, but he swore with impatience, waved vaguely, and started off again. He'd already gone some distance when he stopped and looked. There was no longer anyone on the hill. So the Arab was sat there on the edge of the hill, his arms hanging low. So he was waiting there, right? What was he waiting there before? He was struggling to decide where to go. We know that they understood each other fairly clear. Why is he struggling with this? We know that the easy answer here is no, do not turn yourself in. Feels guilt about what? Yeah, so feels guilty about the murder. Is there anything else that might be compelling him to, at least think about whether he should run or not?
Where was the south leading to?
The south was leading to some nomads who would protect him from the law.
So basically, like, he would give them 1,000 francs for like food and like whatever.
No, he would just he would just live with them and he'd be protected. So his two choices here are he can either turn himself in or be free. Yeah. Yeah. So he's decided between these two choices, right? He can go to prison or he can free himself. It seems like an easy answer. How come he's struggling? One is he probably feels guilty about the murder. The other one is what's going to happen to Dario?
They didn't give much explanation to him either, so they kind of doesn't know what's going on.
Could be some confusion.
Yeah.
The other one as well is, again, Dario was ordered to do this, right? What happens if you disobey an order? We know he's an army man. Something not good. Sometimes it's execution. He gets punished, right? He's going to get some kind of blame. He's going to get some kind of punishment here. Could that be influencing the prisoner's decision? Maybe. Yeah, it could be. So one potential thing here could be that the prisoner, was treated So maybe the prisoner was treated well by Darrow. He objectively was, right? He was fed, he was given tea, he was given supplies, all this stuff. He was treated pretty nicely. And so maybe he doesn't want to see Darrow get punished because he knows if he does not turn himself in, well, they know that Darrow was supposed to do it. Darrow didn't do it. So this is his struggle. About he's struggling to decide: do I free myself or do I turn myself in? Sorry, and then Darrow's fine. I can pay for my crimes, or do I escape and I'm not caught? I don't pay for my crimes, but maybe Darrow might have something back to it. We don't know. So there's no longer anyone on the hill. Darrow hesitated. The sun was now rather high in the sky and was beginning to beat down on his head. The schoolmaster retraced his steps, at first somewhat uncertainly and then with decision. When he reached the little hill, as he was bathed in sweat, he climbed it as fast as he could and stopped, out of breath at the top. The rock fields to the south stood out sharply against the blue sky, but on the plain to the east, a steamy heat was already rising. And in that slight haze, Darrow, with a heavy heart, made out the Arab slowly walking on the road to his prison. So he looks to, he looks out to the rock fields, right? And it says here, the rock fields to the south stood out really sharp. It's really easy to see. But when he looks to the east, we have a steamy heat. The east is towards that city, and he sees the Arab. So what would the prisoner choose? Yeah, chose to go to prison. A little while later, standing at the window of his classroom, the schoolmaster was watching the clear light bathing the whole surface of the plateau, but he hardly saw it. Behind him on the black pool, among the winding French rivers, sprawled out clumsily the chalked up words he had just read. You handed over our brother. You will pay for this. Darrow looked at the sky, the plateau, and beyond the invisible land stretching all the way to the sea. In this vast landscape he loved so much, he was alone. And that's the end of our story. So this last thing here, you handed over our brother, you'll pay for us. On the previous page, we had caught somewhere that he heard a sound, right? I don't exactly know where, but somewhere in here, you heard a sound just as they were leaving. So just as they left, you heard a sound. The sound you heard was these people who came over here, right? For this person. We know early on in the story, the context, how come they took this prisoner away? Because his family was getting restless about it. And so now his family have followed him and they found out that Darrow was the one who was supposed to turn him in. Now, from their perspective, he's done that, right? But what we know is that the prisoner chose to do it. So, you hand over a brother, you will pay for this. What does this probably mean is that, well, in terms of Darrow's and the law, the people who ordered him to it, they're fine with him. Yeah, you followed your orders, you delivered him. But the other one is now, Darrow is probably being targeted by the prisoner's family. Doesn't really seem like there's phones or anything. So either way, he's kind of between a rock and a hard place here, right? Yeah, so quite a bit of stuff here. So again, this was only 7 pages, 6 pages, something like that, but it took us a long time. And so when I say interact with the text, you can see how that can be kind of helpful here, right? Especially because you're going to come back to this in 2 months, and and you could read the whole thing, but usually you want to read a really short summary of it. So sometimes what I like doing is I like putting a little summary here while it's fresh in our head, but also to help make sense of the story and also to help future you. So I like doing a little bit of a summary. And so this is just in the broadest terms possible, right? As simple, as short, as sweet as we can be. What was this story about? What happened in this story from, beginning to end? Darrow gets tasked with taking a prisoner in. Oh, what did I just do? Dare gets tasked with taking in a prisoner. Sorry, just going up a little bit. I'll do this sometimes. I'll go up and down. So, okay, we have our prisoner. Okay. The prisoner murdered his cousin. They treated the prisoner pretty well, right? Gave him a bed, fed him. He let him take the rope off his hands. All that stuff. The prisoner does not run at night. He had the chance, he didn't. And so in the morning, Daru offers prisoner two choices. He can either have freedom or turn himself in, but it's the prisoner's choice. Prisoner chooses to turn himself in. And Daru comes back to a threat from the prisoner's family. Right? Short and sweet. You're welcome to add more details than that. But this is just a really short explanation as to what happened in the story. Now, obviously, the key thing here, though, is this is about the people and their interactions with each other. So normally what we do is, we normally get enough time to, hey, we're going to read this thing, we're going to talk about it. We'll do some type of like exercise with it, usually some writing stuff. Obviously, we don't have time today. Normally we would. So we'll come back to the story tomorrow. We'll talk about it, we'll write about it, etc. But for today, that'll be it. We'll just put it away for now. Yeah, so that's it for the story for today. We'll revisit it tomorrow and start discussing some of the stuff. Yeah. But once you guys have that down, we'll actually let you guys go a couple minutes early here. So we'll end up coming back at 12:30. That's when we'll end up starting our biology class.